So guys, today I'm the photographer of this event, and the event is the baptism of my nephew. And so on top of me, his uncle, I'm also the photographer of the day. And since this is not a real job, of course, I thought that this is the perfect opportunity to do an experiment. And the experiment is try to use in a real world event both a rear camera, so in this case I'm using the Canon R5 with the 24-70 and my iPhone 12 Pro. And so the experiment is to see if I can use both systems in a real world shoot, because this is not a paid job, but is very close to be a real world job. And so this is the concept about the video and about this experiment. And a little bit more about the setting that I'm using. I'm using, as I told you, the Canon R5. And for the ceremony, I used the 24-70 for the lens. And for the ceremony that is going on right now, I'm using a different or a lighter lens that is the 50mm f2. But in summary, the reason why I'm doing this is because I think that both systems are very good. And by the way, I'm using the iPhone with the Pro feature because I want the best quality from the phone basically. And of course the RAW on the camera. But saying that, I want to see if I can use the two systems in this environment, because it's true that for sure a mirrorless camera will have a much higher quality, but it's also true that in some instant the phone could be a better choice. For example, in a group shot where you want to have all the people in focus, it's very hard to do with a traditional camera, because you have a pretty big sensor, and if you know a little bit of photography, you know that bigger is the sensor and bigger is the effect of the shallow depth of field. So when you want to capture the whole scene in focus, you have two choices: or close the diaphragm or use another device, I think. And in these two choices I've chosen to use the phone, because when you close the iris or the aperture of the lens, you will introduce more noise, because you need to increase the ISO value, while with the phone you can shoot wide open and you can still have a good shot without not so much of noise. In fact, I was checking the EXIF data on the phone, and I saw that the EXIF data of the phone is during the church is between 250 ISO and 400 ISO, so not so high. And since I'm shooting with the Pro, I know that the shot won't be so noisy basically. So this is an experiment, because I saw that there is pros and cons to this choice. Because for example, let me give a warm thing that I've noticed. When I was shooting with the phone, always in the EXIF data, I saw that the shutter speed was between 133 per second and 150 second of the shutter, and this is quite low, and it is also quite dangerous, because for example, the mirrorless camera, I never shoot below 1/200 second, because I want to be sure that the subject is freeze. While with the phone, if you are shooting with a native camera app that can give you the Pro feature, you can't choose the value of the shutter. So you have to take this in mind when you are shooting, because for example, if the subject is moving very fast, you could have the problem of having a blurred photos. Pros and cons on this fact basically. And another things that I want to add that I saw during this experiment is that it's cool to have these two systems with you, because you can really be free to move with, for example, a strap like the Black Rapid that I'm using, and you can have the phone in your pocket, so it's very easy to move. And this could be also a solution to have multiple bodies with you, that for a person that I think is at the beginning, could be hard to have two bodies at the same time, or two bodies with different lenses, etc, etc. And last thing, talking about lenses, I've seen that having the phone with the multiple lenses like the iPhone 12 Pro, it's very cool, because you have the ultra wide angle, and since during the ceremony especially actually I was shooting with the mirrorless with the 2470. This means that I could have the ultra wide and at the same time a 2470 at all time. And this is cool because if I didn't use this system, this means that I had to change constantly the lens if I want to make a quick ultra wide shot. So yeah, you can see that the concept could work. I'm not completely sure, but I'm enjoying this, so I think that I'll continue to shoot now and see you in the editing room. Okay guys, so I've done the edit of these photos and I have some interesting thought to share with you. First of all, about the total of the shots that I got. You have to know that I got around 1600 shots with the iPhone and around 550 with the mirrorless camera, the Canon R5. But after selecting all the photos, the result is a little bit closer, because if I want to make a proportion about the shot that I got, the shot that I got with the iPhone is about 1/3 compared to the mirrorless camera. But after the selecting part, I got 40 shots with the iPhone and 86 with the mirrorless camera. So you can see that now the proportion is a little bit lower and the result is a little bit closer, and so interesting. But now let's dive in the thoughts that I got. Okay, I'm losing light very quickly, so I have to open, yeah, maybe, yeah. So after all the editing work, I think that my plan, my experiment worked, because really the shot from the phone was outstanding, considering that it's a phone, of course. But I also think that you still need a mirrorless camera or a reflex camera to do a work like this. But after this experience, I think that you can definitely use a phone like a second body, and this is amazing for sure. So why you should do it, why you should try to compare, or why you should try to use the phone together with a mirrorless camera. The first reason, I think, is inside the possibility to have an ultra-wide camera always with you. And the super interesting fact is that when you're shooting an ultra-wide shot, you know that all the subject is in focus, and this is the same even if you're using a mirrorless camera and of course if you're using a phone. So I think that in the case that you're creating an ultra-wide shot, it's really hard to see when you shot that picture with the phone and when you shot with a mirrorless camera. The second reason is the HDR. You know that nowadays all the phones does a different level of HDR, and this is amazing because HDR means high dynamic range, but in practical terms means that when you are creating a shot with a phone, you can have a wider dynamic range compared to a traditional camera, because a traditional camera shoots only one exposure at the time and is completely different with a phone. So I saw that in a similar environment the shot from the iPhone had a bigger dynamic range. Then there is a factor that is really connected to a phone, that is the fact that all the subject is always in focus, even though you are closer to the subject. And this feature is particularly useful, I think, in all the cases that you need to have all the people in shot. For example, I can think about the moment where there is all the parents around the child just before the baptism, and in that case I want to capture the scene with all the subject in focus. And this is quite hard to do it with a mirrorless camera, because yes, of course you can close the iris or the diaphragm of the lens, but the trade-off is that in that case you will have a shot noisier because you have to crank up the ISO. Whereas with a phone, because it has a smaller sensor, there is no problem to create that effect. So I think that in that particular case the iPhone is the better choice. And then last but not least, the phone is extremely quick and easy to use. In fact, for some shots I had my mirrorless camera on the right hand and the phone on the left hand, and when I saw a moment that could be cool to have with a tighter shot and at the same time with a wider shot, the phone was perfect for that instant basically. So this is another key factor that brought me to choose the phone. But now guys, before continuing to the reason why you shouldn't use a phone, let me inform you that the preset that I used to edit faster, really fast shots is my own preset by my digital store, and you have to know that I've created two different versions of this preset. One is specifically made for shots shooted by a traditional camera like a Canon R5, but you can use also on drones, 360 camera and action cameras, and the other one is made for shots for iPhone and to be a little bit more clearer for shots shooted with the Apple Pro, but you can definitely use with JPEG shots as well. And the key factor of all these presets is that with this preset you will aiming to a natural look that is very important to me, because I want that my photos representing as close as possible the moment that I captured. And also the fun fact is that all these presets between the classic version and the iPhone version are designed to work together, so you can use the same preset in the same environment and have a pretty close match with the two cameras. Last but not least, in the download folder that you have in both the preset, you will have a huge guide where I will teach you how to install the preset on all the Lightroom flavors, so Lightroom Classic, Lightroom CC, this version that I'm using right now, and also Lightroom Mobile. But also in the guide you will learn how to use the preset, because I really care about the fact that after you purchase the preset you will use it. I want that you downloaded the preset and don't use it. I really care that you do it. So in the guide there is a great part where I teach you how to use these presets. And then you have to know that if you're watching this at the time that I'm uploading this video on YouTube, all these presets will be 50% off till the end of January 2023. You can find all of these down below. So guys, let's go back to the video. Why you shouldn't do or why you shouldn't choose the iPhone? The main reason is related to the EXIF data, because I found that the minimum shutter speed that the iPhone used during the church but also during the reception was around 133 and 150 of seconds. And this is quite low compared to the fact that with the mirrorless camera I always use the time like 1/200 of seconds, because I really want that my subject is freezed, and with the phone, especially with the iPhone, if you're using the native camera app, you can have the control of the shutter. So this is the first reason why you shouldn't use the phone for a fast subject like kids, for example, that are super fast and super tricky to photograph. Then, to aiming the shallow depth of field that you can definitely have in a mirrorless camera, you can use on the phone the portrait mode. But depending on the phone that you are using, the cutoff of the edge of the subject isn't always so perfect. So if you want to have the perfect cutoff of the subject, you should definitely use the mirrorless camera. Also, you have to take in consideration that when you are using the portrait mode, you won't be shooting in RAW but in JPEG. And I think that to have the most from the phone, you have to shoot RAW as much as possible. So this is another reason why you shouldn't shoot a ton of photos with the portrait mode. But for that type of shot, you should use the mirrorless camera. Even though I've shooted some portrait of my girlfriend, and in that case the phone did a pretty good job, but you have to consider that in that instant the subject was pretty still. So I was sure that the photo wasn't blurry, but I think that for all the other instances you have to use the mirrorless camera. Last reason why you shouldn't use the phone is the fact that when you are not controlling the amount of light of the scene, you can have a pretty dark scene, and in that instant I think that a mirrorless camera can do a better job, because if you think about the dimension of the sensor in a mirrorless camera is a lot bigger compared to the sensor in a phone. So also for that fact, if for example the scene is quite low, I really suggest that you don't shoot with the phone. So guys, that's it for this video. I really hope that was interesting to you, because for me at least it was really interesting to see the progress of the computational photography in our phone that are so accessible in our your pocket. In fact, for that reason, I've just bought the iPhone 14 Pro because I really want to improve this way to work, and I think that in general is really cool that we all have this possibility that we didn't have for sure in the last years. So guys, that's it for this video. Again, don't forget to follow me also on Instagram to see behind the scenes content, and drop a like for this video and subscribe to this channel to see other content like this. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!